Welcome back, PetaPixel viewers. It is Chris Niccolls here, and look at this adorable little Fujifilm X-M5 that I've brought to show you. This is a pre-production camera, so we're going to give you our first thoughts on this compact, very useful little vlog-style camera. Now, there's no arguing with the fact that this Fujifilm X-M5 is a gorgeous little camera, very stylish. I love the chrome. It's nice just, be around town with this. And you might be sitting at home saying, I want a stylish camera. I'm tired of my boring giant black SLR. Nobody gives me any street cred. Nobody gives me any respect. Do you know who will take that ugly camera? KEH.com. They don't care. They'll take all the ugly, bulky cameras because they know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And now you might think, well, nobody's going to give me any money for this ugly, boring camera, but KEH.com has experts that know exactly the worth of your camera. They're going to evaluate it. There's a great online quote tool for you to make it so simple, and you're going to get a fair price without any haggling or any problems, any flaking out or anything like that. So if you're embarrassed by your camera and you want to have something more compact and more stylish like this little X-M5, check out KEH.com. That is why they are PetaPixel's official pre-owned camera gear partner. So this little Fujifilm X-M5 is intended to be a very pocketable, very stylish entry-level camera for beginner photographer and video enthusiasts. And at only 355 grams, it's definitely lightweight too. Now, I know that this is a pre-production camera and you're already furious, like, oh, Chris, you're not gonna be able to show us like any real details about image quality or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, at the heart of this little X-M5 is the 26 megapixel X-Trans APS-C sensor that we've seen on really nice cameras, like for example, the X100V. This is a known commodity. We know the image quality out of this sensor is excellent. We know it's gonna be good, and frankly, that's a pretty high-end sensor to put in such an affordable camera. What we absolutely can evaluate though is the handling of this little X-M5. And the first thing that I noticed was here on the top left, we've got a Fujifilm film simulation dial here. This is something we already saw on the X-T50. That camera's a lot more expensive, 40 megapixel sensor, EVF, bigger body design. And I think that this dial actually makes a lot of sense here on a more entry-level body for somebody who's just getting into it and wants to play with all these modes. Maybe you haven't used these film simulation modes before. This makes a lot of sense. So around the dial, we've got a lot of hard-coded ones. These are the most popular choices from, Provia and Velvia all the way to Acros. But then you also have three options that you can customize yourself for your favorite film simulation modes. As well, you also have a setting where you can use the dial to quickly cycle through them all. Now on the other side of the X-M5, we've got twin control dials. This is kind of an interesting setup. So the front control dial, it's got a nice smooth turn to it, and it does have a push button function. This lets me cycle between using this as an aperturing if I don't have it on the lens. I can push it again to then choose my film simulation modes and push it again as an ISO selector, and that's how I'm using here primarily with this setup. On the back control dial, there's no locking mechanism, but you do make note that it's quite a hard turn, and I think that's intentional so you don't accidentally bump it. I will say, actually, I don't mind it. This makes a lot of sense to me. It's not like it's really hard to turn, but I don't feel like I'm going to accidentally move it too much. And then we have the quick menu button, which frankly is not in the handiest of spots. It's kind of wedged in between our mode dial and that actual control dial, and I find it actually quite hard to push quickly, and I use the quick menu on Fujifilm cameras all the time. Interestingly enough, we also have a threaded cable release. That's a nice throwback to a more retro design. And here on our mode dial, we've got all the stuff that you normally expect. There is a vlog setting on here as well. Now on the back of the camera, it's pretty standard Fujifilm affair. We've got our drive button up here at the top left. That lets us go between all of our different drive modes, as well as multiple exposures, panorama, all that kind of stuff. We don't have a lot else. Actually, it's a pretty simple system because there's not much to hold on to here. But we do have a Fujifilm joystick, so I can navigate everything easily. And of course, I also have a touch screen. What we don't have is an EVF. We've got something that looks like it. It's a mic port. Jordan's going to talk about it in a bit, but that's at first where I'm like, oh, what is this? Interesting. It's not an EVF. And that's too bad. I mean, yeah, I get that this is an entry-level camera. We're really then going to be dependent just on the back LCD panel. Now, this back panel is a touch panel, as I've mentioned already, fully articulating to go properly into selfie style, and it's designed how videographers like it. As for photography, I have to say there's a couple things. First off, I definitely had to crank the brightness up, especially on a bright day like today, to actually be able to see it. But with the brightness cranked up, I can absolutely compose with it. Sadly though, it's not a really high resolution screen. We're just over a million dots, 1.04 million dots. I know that keeps the cost down, but this is our only display to speak of on this camera, and it's pretty entry-level stuff. I want to point out an important tool that we've been using today. So as you can see, it's a pretty sunny day right now. Got light coming across my face. It's not even in my face, it's side lighting me. I'm getting a strong shadow on this side of my face, and With bright sunlight, I actually got really sensitive eyes. I'm kind of a squinty McSquinterson at the best of times. It's pretty harsh. So what we're gonna now do is, there you go, much better. Okay, so you can see now we've got this nice big diffusion panel. It's just softening that light on me, but it's still keeping a nice balance with the exposure and the background. So this is the Westcott 50-inch 5-in-1 reflector. We don't normally bring this out because it is physically quite large to carry around, but the 50-inch is really nice when you want to make full use of that diffusion panel to cover not just a face, but actually a whole shot like this, head, torso, everything, and it covers me with this nice, soft, natural looking light. What you do often need is a really good light stand, but I've got a Jordan Drake. I know a lot of his fans call him like the tripod, but he's far more useful as a light stand, let me tell you. It's a really nice tool to have, and it's great when you want that big diffusion. So if you want to get this product, check out the link in the description below, and remember that Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. Now for an entry-level camera, we actually have a pretty nice autofocusing suite here as well. We're getting something very similar algorithm-wise to like what we'd have on the Fujifilm X-S20, for example, with the same sensor. We're getting Fujifilm's excellent now face and eye detect, as well as picking up, bodies and people, torsos. And again, it isn't a separate menu, unfortunately. I wish it was with the other subject detection modes, but we do get the other subject detection modes, like animals or trains, planes, automobiles, motorcycles. That's all in there. And so this camera actually does focus quite reliably. Now for an entry-level camera, this actually has pretty impressive drive rates when you do need to shoot sports and action. First thing I want to mention is this shoots about 8 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode. That's pretty respectable. And of course, you're not going to get any rolling shutter there, but you can go up to 20 frames per second if you want to use the electronic shutter. And actually, the sensor reads out fairly fast, so you're not going to have too many problems regardless. If you do want to go into sports mode where you get more of a crop factor, you can go up to 30 frames per second if you really need it. Now, I do also want to mention when it comes to burst rates, we can't fully evaluate this camera right now because it's still pre-production. That's something we'll definitely revisit if we do a full review on this, but I will say it bursts for a lot longer than I thought it would, and that's a really good thing because as far as card type goes, we have a UHS 1-speed card slot in here. That means this can take quite a bit longer to clear that buffer, but the buffer does seem really good. Now as for a battery type, this uses the classic Fujifilm W126 battery. You're probably gonna have a lot of these lying around if you're an existing Fujifilm user. It's appropriate for this size of camera though. It lets you have a little bit of a smaller body design, and we're still getting about 330 CPA rated shots out of it, which is actually pretty good for a camera this size. But that pretty much does it for photographic capabilities on this little camera. There's actually a lot to talk about with video, so let's go to Jordan now.
All right, it's Jordan here to talk about the video capabilities of the X-M5, which is filming me right now in 6.2K open gate 10-bit video on a camera that costs less than $1,000. This is a very capable video camera, and it actually introduces some new video features we've never seen from Fujifilm before, so get used to my face because I'm going to be talking for a while. So essentially with the X-M5, we're getting all of the record modes we previously saw on the X-S20, which is very full-featured. So unlike a lot of entry-level cameras, this has a headphone and mic jack, but they're on opposite ends of the camera. We can record that 6.2K open gate, which is great if you want to pull different aspect ratios out of your footage. It also shoots oversampled 4K using the full width of the sensor up to 30 frames per second. This can also shoot 4K 60p, but does have to use a small 1.18 times crop factor. There's also a new 4K long play option that uses the same 1.18 times crop factor from 4K 60p in order to give you longer record times and slower frame rates. As well, we've got a new vertical recording mode. And I know most of the time you're like, well, just put the camera on, hold it vertically, and you'll get full 4K resolution. But what this does is actually records using the central 1080p region of the 6.2K horizontal recording. So you can keep your camera horizontal and record vertical video at 1080p with it. But for most people, honestly, just hold your camera sideways like that and get full resolution. Now, the big question that I have with all of these different record modes is how the overheating is going to be with such a small body. And it's worth pointing out that Fujifilm actually has the screws and contacts that you can add the fan accessory to this, but I'm waiting for a production model before I go into serious overheating tests on it. So the biggest drawback to the X-M5 compared to the X-S20, in my opinion, is there is no in-body image stabilization. So you can see we got a lot of movement in the frame. Let's kick on the digital stabilizer. So you can see now we've got a big crop, bigger than what we see with the other Fujifilm bodies when we kick on digital stabilization. But this is a new system. It brings in a 1.32 times crop, again on top of the existing APS-C crop. The other big difference though is this is also going to compensate for rolling shutter as well as camera movement. It does look a little bit artificial, but it certainly smooths out the bumps. All right, so I've recorded the rest of this episode with our beautiful Sennheiser wireless mics, but I've switched over to the internal microphone right now because Fujifilm have made some real changes to it. There's multiple microphones built into this, and you now get the option to choose which area it's recording in. So Chris, could you be annoying for a second?
Annoying? How about this? I'll just give you a really nice beatbox soundtrack with your talk.
Sounds annoying. So we can choose the microphone directionality. So right now it's giving us the audio from everything around it, all sides of the camera, but we can now focus it just on me. So it just records what's in front of the camera, and you should hear Chris get a little bit quieter in the sound mix. But now you're all like, Chris is the star of the show, we want more Chris. So you can switch the microphone to record just what's behind the camera if you want to narrate your own videos. And if all you care about is what's directly in front or behind, you can also bring up the audio mode and just have it do that and cut down some of the ambient sound around it. And we get lots of me and lots of Chris, and this is my worst idea ever. There's also a major interface change with the X-M5. Now, we saw a very basic vlog mode on the XS20. It gave you a few small functions like the ability to just blur the background out, but they've expanded on it dramatically with the X-M5. So we've got a whole bunch of icons all around the frame, and some of them I'm gonna say are inspired, not actively ripped off from Sony. So we've got like product priority, where it'll focus on whatever object you hold up to the camera. We've got background defocus, and you get touch control of the different microphone directions if you're using the built-in mic. It's actually quite intuitive, and what I really like about this mode is you're not limited in terms of any of your record modes or anything when you switch over to vlog mode. So if you want to just operate this as a touchscreen camera, especially with the screen facing you, it's actually extremely usable now. So basically the X-M5 is just a very powerful hybrid camera, and it's honestly interesting that it kind of goes toe-to-toe with the Sony ZV-E10 II, which is a more expensive body and one built specifically for video, but in a lot of ways this is actually a better option. But I'm not going to make a full assessment till we get a production camera, and who knows, maybe we'll do a shootout in the future. I'll see you all then. Back to Chris.
So, you know, first thing I really like about the Fujifilm X-M5 is it is an affordable camera, and it's good to actually have more affordable cameras on the market. So as a photographic tool, these are the things that I love about it, you know, considering this is just a first look. The handling overall, I think, is actually really nice. I like the 2 command dials. I like the mode dial controls. I like having those Fujifilm simulation modes. You know, the autofocusing joystick, everything actually is very functional for a basic camera. We do have good manual control. The autofocus is reliable at this price point. I actually even like the burst modes. They seem to be fast enough for most casual photography, and even touching into a little bit of fun action and sports. I mean, hell, there's even a working flash hot shoe on here, and there's more expensive cameras that do a similar kind of role that even forego that. So I do really like the full featuredness of this camera, except when it comes, of course, to displays. It's very common, though, at this camera price point that you don't get an EVF, but as a photographer, I would still really appreciate that, especially because this back panel doesn't seem to be anything to really write home about. But the redeeming nature here is as a hybrid platform, because as you've seen from Jordan Drake's talk here, the video features on this camera are fantastic for the money. I mean, this does make it a really powerful vlog camera and creator's camera. And if we look at the competition, I mean, the Canon EOS R50 would be certainly a good choice. That camera is definitely more aimed at the photographer. So I appreciate that. Having a proper EVF, you know, nice manual controls, but it is a bit of a physically larger camera, especially when you consider Canon doesn't have a very healthy APS-C lens lineup. So you're forced to use larger full frame RF glass for that camera in a lot of cases. You could also look at the competition like the Sony ZV-E10 II series. No EVF as well, similar kind of size, similar kind of roll, and very good video capabilities, but definitely more expensive than this camera. Both Sony and Fuji as well have tons of APS-C lenses, so you got lots to choose from there. So no matter how you slice it, the Fujifilm X-M5 is giving us a very compelling package, and it's something I want to play with more when we have a full production copy to review fully, maybe even do some comparisons. But I hope you guys enjoyed this first look at the Fujifilm X-M5. Leave your comments below as always, we appreciate that. And we listen to them and we talk about them on the podcast. Listen to the PetaPixel podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps, or you can see it on this exact same channel. Visit store.petapixel.com for all of our merch. And as always, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you soon with more shortly on PetaPixel.